All right, let's dive straight into this explainer and totally deconstruct how to engineer the ultimate plate of nachos. We're talking about a highly structured, science-based culinary protocol here. We are taking something that's usually just thrown together haphazardly and treating it like a precise engineering challenge. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to avoid those classic pitfalls that totally ruin this dish. To do this, we're going to run through 5 distinct phases: the biodynamic nacho protocol, the zero preservative spice matrix, hydrolocking lean turkey meat, engineering liquid gold cheese, and finally, the structural sheet pan assembly. Hitting these 5 steps lets us isolate and patch up the most common failures you see in standard homemade nachos. Starting with phase 1, the biodynamic nacho protocol. To really kick off our analysis, we have to look at the troubling user data that sparked this whole project. So, when analyzing over 200 comments from our source data, we found a massive 30% dissatisfaction rate regarding the flavor depth of lean turkey compared to traditional beef. People are literally saying turkey is bland, or it just misses that deep, rich, savory note you crave in a hearty plate of nachos. That 30% failure rate, that is exactly what this protocol is designed to eliminate. Let's move right into phase 2, the zero preservative spice matrix. This is where we build the foundation to solve that huge flavor deficit. The absolute first rule here, we are completely ditching store-bought seasoning packets. Those convenient little packets are often packed with anti-caking agents, like silicon dioxide. No thanks. By building a zero preservative matrix completely from scratch, we control exactly what goes into the flavor profile. This yields about 1/4 cup of pure, unadulterated seasoning, perfectly scaled for 1 pound of meat. Now, every single ingredient here has a very specific chemical job. Take the smoked paprika. It isn't standard in your everyday taco recipe, but it is an absolute must-have here. It brings in those crucial glutamates, that umami factor, to really mimic the richness of beef. Then we've got ancho chili powder for base depth, toasted cumin for earthy aromatics, and dried oregano. And hey, quick tip on the oregano. You've got to crush it between your fingers before adding it to wake up those dormant essential oils. Every single component serves a targeted purpose. Moving to phase 3, hydro-locking lean turkey meat. Because look, we've fixed the flavor, but if the texture turns into a dry crumble, the whole protocol fails. 93. That is your golden number for lean poultry here. You absolutely must use 93% lean turkey. If you grab the 99% lean stuff just to save a few calories, you are literally setting yourself up for failure. It is structurally unsound for flavor retention, and it'll dry out immediately. Oh, and to balance things out, we're adding 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or lime juice during the cook. That chemically cuts any of that lingering gamey taste turkey can sometimes have. All right, here's how we assemble this perfect filling. Step 1 is where the actual magic happens, the 60-second aromatic bloom. Please don't just dump spices onto raw meat. Instead, sauté a diced onion, drop in your spice matrix, and add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, which acts as a total umami bomb straight into the hot oil. Why? Because oil-soluble spices release their flavors exponentially better in hot fat than they do in water. Cook that for 60 seconds until it's dark red and fragrant. Then sear your turkey and finally build your emulsion. Adding a 1/2 cup of low-sodium broth and simmering hydrolyzes the turkey, locking all that incredible bloomed flavor into a glossy coating instead of a watery soup. Up next, phase 4, engineering liquid gold cheese. The protein is stabilized, so we've reached the critical point. Let's be real, a plate of nachos lives or dies by its cheese. If you have ever tried making a cheese sauce at home and it came out gritty, the culprit was probably right in your grocery bag. Pre-shredded cheese is heavily coated in starches and cellulose just to keep it from clumping on the shelf. Well, those exact same starches will completely destroy your melting texture. You have got to use hand-shredded block cheese if you want that perfectly smooth melt. To nail that incredibly satisfying, gooey, ballpark-style texture using actual real food, we're leading on a classic French culinary technique called a Mornay sauce. So rather than relying on heavily processed chemical melting salts, a Mornay sauce builds off a scratch-made bechamel base. We're talking a simple roux of real butter and flour combined with warm milk and real cheddar. The result? A chemical-free but beautifully velvety texture. Now, this 3-step process is a bit delicate, but it's highly repeatable if you just follow the science. First, you build the roux. Melt some grass-fed butter, whisk in organic flour, and cook it for exactly 1 minute to cook off that raw flour taste. Second is the expansion phase. You'll slowly whisk in 1.25 cups of milk, and this is absolutely vital. That milk has to be warm. Cold milk will totally shock the delicate roux and cause clumping. Finally, the melt.
Add your 8 ounces of hand-shredded sharp cheddar, a touch of garlic powder, and a splash of jalapeno brine for an authentic kick.
But hold on, before you drop that cheese in, consider this your mandatory laboratory safety warning. You must turn off the heat. If you drop your gorgeous hand-shredded cheese into a boiling or even simmering liquid, the intense heat will cause the delicate cheese oils to separate and the proteins to denature. You'll be left with a greasy, grainy mess. Instead, melt the cheese in 3 distinct batches, strictly off the burner. Let the residual heat of the thickened milk do all the work.
Finally, Phase 5, Structural Sheet Pan Assembly. We've got our flavor-locked turkey and our liquid gold cheese ready to go. Let's execute the final structural build. Standard plating usually creates this massive, impressive-looking mountain of chips, but scientifically speaking, it is a disaster. Piling them up drastically reduces the surface area, and all those hot ingredients get trapped inside the center, creating a steaming effect that instantly turns the underlying layers into a sad, soggy mess. We need crispness and structural integrity from top to bottom. The fix here is the sheet pan method. By spreading organic corn chips perfectly flat in a single layer on a wide baking sheet, you maximize your chip-to-cheese surface area. Drizzle on half the cheese sauce, evenly distribute your hydrolocked turkey, and then, here's the pro move, bake it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for exactly 5 minutes. This crisps up the foundation and perfectly melts the base layers together. Only after it comes out of the oven do you drench it in the remaining cheese and load up the heavy, wet, cold toppings like fresh salsa, radish, and guacamole. And hey, if you want to pivot the protocol entirely, you're in luck, because the components we just engineered are super versatile. This perfectly hydrolocked meat is honestly just as incredible served up as tacos. Just swap out the chips for some charred organic corn tortillas, load up that flavorful turkey, and top it off simply with fresh pico de gallo and sliced avocado. The science behind the meat stays exactly the same. So now that you grasp the exact science behind the biodynamic protocol, you will never have to scrape a sad, soggy chip off a plate ever again. You know how to bloom spices for maximum umami, you know how to lock moisture into lean proteins, and you know how to manage temperatures for a flawless, velvety cheese sauce. But the biggest takeaway here is the mindset, breaking a dish down to its core components and fixing the root cause of its failures. So what everyday recipe will you scientifically elevate next?